Okay, so this lecture, as it's probably not going to be a surprise to anyone, is the first follow-up day of the game development project. So, as I mentioned to the couple of participants already, the idea is not that this lecture takes the entire time. The idea is that I'll give you a short talk about how game companies work in general, give you a couple of ideas on what sort of things game companies do when they develop games, and then if you have something you want to present me, your tutorial works, talk about your own game design document and stuff, you are more than welcome to do so. So just stay put and after the lecture and we'll talk. Okay, so today's agenda, as I mentioned earlier, is a given short insight into how game companies work. When a game company is created, it starts as a seed company, or well, a business startup, more or less, and how it evolves, what sort of things it needs, how, and later, when the company is actually a functioning game-producing company, what do they actually do in those organizations? Okay, but before we get into that, there's a couple of pointers I'd like to mention. First of all, this is the picture I showed on the first lecture day. This is the entire game development project, the entire program that takes the full academic year. So we are here at the very first bullet here, doing the fundamentals of Unity. And you can't take all these modules. They will be arranged at some point during this year. The Game Jam Code Camp, which is the next one, right in January, the Gamification Proto Camp between the third and fourth period, so it will be somewhere around March. And the last one, Game Development Crash Course, is something you can take during the last fourth period and summertime. In all these, the idea is that I'll give some pointers, some ideas, some briefing lectures on the general topic, but the idea here is that these modules are all assisted self-study work. Okay, so there was some questions regarding how these modules will be graded, and well, these credits are incremental. It means that if you complete all the modules, you will be given 15 credit course on game development project. How you use it on your bachelor's program is up to you and your study council, but starting this year, all these modules, Unity, Game Jam, Crash Course, and ProtoCamp, are only counted once. If you have already been given a study program where you have, for example, the Game Jam participation twice as 2 different code camps, those are grandfathered in, meaning that they are still valid, but for the new people taking these courses, arrange your program so that you can take all these modules at least once. Of course, we welcome you to participate on the later game jams. It's more the merrier, really, but you can claim the credits from only your first participation. So, going into this actual course. So, the idea on these follow-up days is that you can present your tutorial projects and your personal project game design document after these short lectures. The idea is that the tutorial projects teach you the fundamental aspects of Unity, so you know how things how the basics work in the Unity development tool. Then, after you have completed the tutorials and showed me or emailed me with your game design document, then you are tasked to create your own work. After you have created your work, you will be given 2 similar works to review, and give a grade. What you think, how complete and how fun the game was, and so on and so on. So basically, these two projects are the only things we are doing here on this Fundamentals of Unity work. You have until the end of this month to do the tutorial works, and you have until the end, the deadline for delivering personal projects is somewhere before Christmas. The idea is that you get the credits from this course before New Year's Eve. So those of you who can't be here on next year, who are traveling back to home country or going to military service or anything or something like that, will get your credits from this year's work. Anyway, I still want to emphasize on the personal project the aspect that think something relatively simple. Create sort of an arcade game. I know that you probably want to create something that's really cool and interesting, some arcade, shooter, adventure, flight simulator game or whatever, but please keep the first idea simple. I know you can probably imagine something really cool stuff, but for the purposes of this course, just create something that works. When you have something that works, then you can more or less create something fancier and more awesome projects for your friends to see and for commercial purposes. On the design document, which you are tasked to define at the same time, define me what your work, what your personal game project will be at the time when you are delivering the tutorial projects. I want you to write down these following things: the general theme, main characters, if there is any genre, most important features. If you have story, please keep a short storyboard or summary of that, and all the technical decisions besides using Unity. This means input devices or how graphics are done or rendering stuff if you want to do something more difficult, or if you want to have a multiplayer capability, then give a short mentioning about that on the document. It's more or less so that I know what you are going to do, can give you some pointers, and more importantly, the people reviewing your work have an idea what you were going to do and how close to the original idea you got. So it gives a point of comparison. It also gives you the idea of how complex work you will be doing. So if it sounds really complicated on the paper, it's probably way too complicated as an application or when you are actually trying to develop it. A couple of restrictions. I'm going to give you a short recap on these because these were the things that were asked after the last lecture. So there's really not many restrictions. One is that, of course, it has to be openable in standard free Unity, or at least playable with the Unity web player on normal Firefox or Chrome installation. If your reviewer can't play your game, then obviously they're going to give you a bad grade for it. Also, there are several fancy additions or things in Unity which more or less almost make the entire game for you, but for the purposes of actually understanding what the Unity is doing or what is happening in your game, please also keep the design simple. You can't buy stuff from the asset store. You can get something like artificial intelligence or the freely animated things, or basically any assets from the tutorial. You can also buy stuff if you want to, because I'm not expecting you to learn how to draw stuff or how to create 3D animated characters. The point here is on the development work. But in any case, all the external assets has to be referenced where you got it, and it can't be something that you illegally acquired. Of course, I know that there are places where you can import 3D characters and stuff, and you can use screen captures to create textures and stuff like that. but please keep it so that it's self-made, made public domain, open source, or you have license to use it. Because there's a slight chance that some of the games will be demonstrated, for example, to the high school students or other places, and it would be really awkward, and actually it would cause legal repercussions if you submit something that you ripped out directly from Diablo 3 and we try to show it as our own work to someone else. Keep in mind that the project works are also your, well, let's say advertisements that I can do this and this and this. Okay, so, and importantly, I know that there's some people who have been taking parts of this course earlier years. You have to develop a novel game for this course. So it can't be something that was made earlier. You just submit it for this year's course. It has to be made for this particular Fundamentals of Unity course. Okay, but that's that. The second follow-up day will be late October, meaning that probably in 3 weeks, so a couple of days before the deadline for delivering the tutorial project and game design document. You will be given more information on that via Noppa, so keep watching that news channel. Okay, so the first 15 minutes was used to give a quick recap on what you actually should be doing on this course. So let's take a look into the actual topic we had for today. So, making games. What are we doing when we create games? There's a line on the game development project course description saying that this course is something that should enable you to use your experience on software development work on the game development domain. Meaning that if you are able programmer, know something about software engineering, have possibly passed courses like object-oriented design or fundamentals of software engineering, introduction to software testing, these courses, you have a pretty good idea on how software is made, meaning all the applications that run on the computers or even something like operating systems and stuff like that. So, how do we make games then? Basically, there's really not that many differences from the viewpoint of actually doing the development work. We have the design work, we have to design the product to cater to our audiences or be something that could be used to make profit. There's also development work and programming tasks. You have to do programming work, you have to create source code, you have to do all the development tasks, no matter if you are programming stuff for spreadsheet calculator or mobile application. Well, the programming work is there. Also, there's tools. Interestingly, on some occasions, even the same tools in both sides. Something like a Microsoft Visual Studio, these sort of things are used on both sides. Everyone does testing and quality assurance work, and in general, the objective in games and in software in general are that the project is done in time, in budget, with the intended features and with acceptable quality. These all are, well, these are common features. These all are true, and these all are things that are more or less exactly the same as with the software engineering work, for example, for mobile phones or operating systems or developing applications for iPhone or iPad or whatever or you are doing. However, of course, there are differences. First, most important difference probably is that the emphasis is on the customers, on the market. And the design has more emphasis on the artistic vision on how things should happen. For example, the zombie games were really popular a couple of years ago. Now they are past their prime because everyone is making zombie games and the customers are getting really annoyed because, well, yet another zombie game, why I have already played the 50 other previous titles. So basically, the emphasis on what the customer might actually want. Because the games inherently don't have any meaningful purpose. The software you use, for example the PowerPoint here, is used to give presentations. The Word, LibreOffice Writer, text editing tools, there's database tools, point of sales, software in markets and stuff like that. You can fill your tax income report on the web application. Those are all things that actually serve a purpose. You do something with them. You save time or some other resources by using that application, whereas with games you only use them to entertain yourself. Or, well, the design should be so that the games entertain the users, the customers, and give them the user experience they want. Your users use games only because they want to be entertained. Of course, so it means that you have to create something novel. You have to create something that would be fun, something be different, something that's not done before, or probably at least something that is really popular and would be something that people buy for the sole purpose of entertainment. Of course, it also means that you have to do testing with users. You have to know what they want, you have to listen to those people, and in some occasions you might even have to redefine your design so that it's not anymore what you wanted, but it's something that the customers seemed to prefer instead. So basically, the design work is more involved with customers, the testing work is more involved with customers. If the customers can use your software, or if they would have to take a course to be able to play your game, it would suck really badly. Also, there's other things like sound design. For example, in shooting games, it's quite common that there's the different weapons and explosions and stuff like that, which really create the immersive feeling. For example, in a way that you know where the gunfire is coming from, or you have sort of you can sort of pick out, for example, approaching helicopter sound from the soundtrack. Of course, this both with the surround system and with headset. So basically, the sound design is something that's completely alien to normal software development. Also, something like 3D mathematics, artificial intelligence, real-time client-to-client multiplayer systems, these are more or less unusual features on applications. So it's not, the programming tasks are not always something that's really simple to do or something that's really common in the application industry. For example, the use of artificial intelligence here is something that actually has its own really delicate algorithms, because the real artificial intelligence, for example, simulating brain or stuff like that, would probably work here, but you also have to keep in mind the difficulty curve. So you have to create artificial intelligence that is challenging, but also beatable. On the other hand, the artificial intelligence has to be something that plays a good game but is still beatable. So you can't create an algorithm which always calculates the optimal solution to every problem, because the computer has the advantage of doing many more calculations, and also because the computer always knows what cards, for example, the player has, it always can react in an optimal way if the algorithm is designed poorly. Overall, compared to software development, the objective in time, in budget, with features and acceptable quality, there's actually a fifth one here. Is the game fun? Is the game providing the preferred user experience? A horror game is not fun by default. I mean, any Silent Hill game played alone in the dark with a headset probably is the farthest thing from pure fun anyone can get. But on the other hand, your customers are paying you to create this sort of user experience where stuff is spooky and they are scared of the of the game, or it creates a sort of a feeling of being scared. So is the game fun, or more likely is the game providing a user experience that your customers prefer? So, going further into the actual development work, these two are the models for developing games. These are the data here is based on our own observations with the game developing companies. We have been conducting studies and working in close cooperation with several game studios here in southeastern Finland. And basically, all these companies are using either this model, the pipeline here, or this iteration model as their main game development approach. It's actually funny enough that all the companies say that the waterfall model, where the design is set really early, excuse me, is not something that they can use. But but at the same time, they are using this sort of a pipeline approach here. It starts with the game idea, or brainstorming. We create the idea for our new product. The best ideas or the best results are then developed into prototype works or proof of concept prototypes. Sort of games, similar games that you are doing at this course. So basically it's not anything fancy. It's something that boots up, shows the idea of the game, may have a couple of purpose-built 3D models, but it may actually be using placeholder graphics or something like that to illustrate the idea. For example, if the company's previous game was a sports game, there might be some ice hockey players which have appropriate animations in place of, for example, pirates or stuff like that. Just showing the idea that, okay, here would be these sort of characters and they are doing this and that. So to give the idea of what is going to happen with the game. Well, you create your marketing concept, you get your funding, and you commit to the development work if enough customers or some publisher or someone else likes your prototype enough. Then you more or less scrap the prototype and start to create the actual game based on the prototype concepts. Then we have this iteration loop here. Development work followed by testing work, creating feedback followed by development work, followed by testing work, creating feedback, and so on and so on. So basically you use any source available, customers, publishers, funders, whatever, target marketing, to get feedback on how the product would do, and you keep going circles here. When the publisher says that, okay, this is what we wanted, or this is close enough, or we have used all the money or time, or the deadline is approaching, or whatever, then the publisher approves the publication and your product goes to maintenance. While in maintenance, if it sells well, you do updates, additional content, DLC stuff. Of course, you also have to release bug fixes and stuff like that. But more or less, the idea is that once the publisher approves that, okay, it's done, then it just goes out to the market and you more or less move on to the next project. So quite straightforward approach. On the other hand, the other approach here, the iteration, is more rough idea. It's based on that the idea on what we want to do is more rough. We have game idea, we create a plan, do development work, do refine the design based on what we did, do testing work, decide what we want to change, and keep going on in this cycle. We collect feedback again from any source, but the idea here is that we start with really a rough plan. We just have something, and we create more refined and more detailed work based on what we see. When the feedback is positive enough, or well, the resources are running out, then it's ready for publishing or publisher. If you get someone to publish your work, it's good. It's really nice. Usually, you have to do self-publications, so it means that you upload the game to App Store or somewhere else. The difference being that here, the commitment to actually publish something was done here, going from prototype to full development. We know that we want to get this game out, and we have funding for it, we have publisher for it, we have the distribution network for it, and so on and so on. Whereas on this model, the iteration, the idea is that we get an idea for a game and then start going on this cycle to get something that's novel. It may not be secure, in a sense that it may not have funding at first, but it's something that we create, and then when it's done, look for publisher or publishing venue for it. So basically, these models are quite close to the plan-driven approach, where the design happens first, and then the game is created as designed. And on the iteration approach, it's, well, sort of a highly agile approach, where we start with an idea and add stuff and take away stuff and move and change stuff until we are satisfied with the feedback we get from the game. So basically, these are the two high-level models the game companies tend to work with. So, on the other hand, well, in addition to that, in testing work, there's as said, the only thing that actually matters is the user experience. Because games do not have serious work or serious application to fulfill, we test the games so that they give the correct user experience. They are easy to use, easy to learn, sophisticated enough, deep enough, or they give you the sort of an appropriate feel on the game. Basically, it also means that the technical aspects, like how well the game performs, is there frame rate drops somewhere, or is the artificial intelligence going to flip out middle of the session, is always there, but it's not the main point. It doesn't have to be always correct. But it has to work, but it doesn't. But it's not the main thing that you want to test. Okay, the AI may be sometimes completely retarded. That's something you can live with. But if the player is unable to move the character, or it moves erratically, then that's something that has to be fixed before publication. On the other hand, there's also additional things like ensuring that the internal logic on the features do not cause a always wins strategy. This is a problem, for example, in strategy games and games emulating board games or something like that. If there is a strategy which always ensures that the player wins unless they somehow make a mistake on their own end, it also means that the game becomes really boring. There's one strategy which trumps everything else, so naturally all the players will always be using that approach. It's a really huge, painful problem, especially in games which are multiplayer games, which also dictates something that like the player which gets the first turn always wins. So of course we can't have that, so that's also something that has to be tested. On the development of normal applications, of course this is no concern. If there's an optimal way or most cost-saving way or the fastest way of doing something, you probably want to teach that to your user anyway, because they are trying to save time or effort or money by using the application. But with games, you might want to hide some of the more advanced strategies, because the joy of finding or learning things from experience is also something that you want to count into your game design. Overall, the most usual ways of doing testing work are listed here. They are user testing, testing with the actual target users, usability testing, testing the user interface, usability aspects, learnability aspects, things like that. Doing explorative testing, meaning that you are testing your product with controlled test sessions. For example, having everyone in the room playing your game and doing, for example, multiplayer matchups or using certain approach to the game and seeing what sort of problems arise from that thing. Finally, on the technical side, unit testing is one thing that actually pops up, not only because it's the most applied testing method anyway, but it's also in some cases, the only technology-focused testing approach the game companies do. So if you are into quality assurance and testing work, user testing, usability testing, explorative testing, and unit testing are the things that you will be doing, or the game companies will be asking you about when you apply, when you are saying that you want to apply for a quality assurance or quality control job with them. Finally, well, not finally, there's several slides here, but also the tools are, well, somewhat different from normal applications. I said earlier that something like Visual Studio is applied everywhere. Yeah, yes, probably they are. But for game companies, these tools have some expectations. I mentioned earlier that the prototyping and proof of concept prototypes are a really common way of actually making design work. So of course it also means that the tools should allow the company to experiment with their product or whip up a fast prototype for some crazy idea the game designer had earlier, so that they can just test, will this work? Will this idea be something that could be done with a mobile phone, or is this approach something that actually works? For example, some ideas which may sound great on paper might not work with the physical system or in a game, whereas on the other hand, some ideas which are completely idiotic on paper might actually be something that's a huge hit on the game market. For example, a game where you have to tap an egg 1 million times. Really, really stupid idea if you put it on paper and try to get a bank loan against that design document, but when you make it as a game, it's a huge success. On the other way around, something like a card trading game, or for example, physical exercise game with a mobile phone might sound a great idea on the paper and be something that companies would really want to create, but then you have your mittens on, you're on a bus station, it's minus 20 Celsius outside, and then the game says that, okay, now we have to start doing exercises. So, of course, what you do, say that, no, I'm not, and push the button and close the software. On the other hand, there might actually be a simple problem that these things are quite slippery. So when you are trying to do something like swap flies with it or something like that, you just accidentally throw your mobile phone away. Not exactly the nicest design ever. And well, of course, these are somewhat critical examples here, or really bad examples on some design principles. But you get the idea that sometimes your great idea on paper doesn't work on games. So that's why you need to have tools which allow prototyping. Simply because you have to try out your ideas. Also, interestingly, when this study was made a couple of years ago, there was still talk about the problem that the game companies need self-made tools. That the game development tools were such as sophisticated or different tools that the companies really had to create them by themselves. This is no longer true. If you find older literature talking about how you have to hire a wealth of engine developers and physics engine developers or rendering stuff and stuff like that, it's not longer absolutely necessary. Actually, companies are migrating away from self-made tools. And from personal experience, I know that if you want to create a game using something like OpenGL library, then you have to have someone who's expert on rendering techniques and those sort of physics calculations. But if you are using something like Unity or any other modern game engine, you more or less can rely on the existing parts. So if someone says that you have to make the tools yourself, it's not the case anymore. But the prototyping thing is really important. Sometimes ideas just don't work. Okay, so we get to the part where we talk about the designing games. So you all have probably at some point already heard these numbers. So, okay, the average gamer player is no longer a young single male teenage living with parents. It's actually everything else but that. First of all, 3 out of 4 households play games, meaning that 3 out of 4 households everywhere are using money to purchase games, where even if it's a Facebook game or browser game or mobile game or whatever, they are still paying for it. The average age of players is around 35 years old, and almost half of the people paying for games or playing games are women. Out of the all people who play, 1/3 says that it's their favorite hobby, so it's the number one thing they use their money. Also meaning that if in most households there's at least one person who actually spends considerable amount of money on games. These numbers are from the 2011 report. There's also a report from the 2013 study in which the numbers are similar. I just want to point out that even though these numbers are a bit old, they still are relevant because the study 2 years ago gave more or less the same numbers, but unfortunately I was unable to locate the report, so I wasn't able to update that slide. Okay, so who gets paid? This was one of the most important things which, for example, in Finland, gave birth to the mobile games industry. The traditional box in a store way means that you use the old approach on making games. You create an idea, you sell it to publisher, who then sells it to distributor, who then sells it to retailer, and who then sells it to customer. So basically it means something like I found a company which develops a game which finds a publisher from, for example, Sweden, and then the Swedish publisher has distribution deal with some larger entity, and that distribution company has a deal with the local S-market chain to sell that game in a store. It means that I create a game here, the Swedes or the publisher puts it in a fancy box, the distributor creates or takes those fancy boxes and puts them in sale at the local Risco. I get 10 cents out of every euro made that way. So it's kind of a bad deal for me, but it was for a long time the only way of doing business. Hence the traditional way. So when the digital distribution became a thing with the app stores and Google Play and with the current generation of game consoles and Steam store and places like that, the numbers changed somewhat. So now, basically, the developer gets 70% of every euro made, and the retailer here, Apple, Google, or Valve company, for example, or Sony or Microsoft, whoever owns the marketplace, gets 30% cut. Much better deal to me. So it also meant that smaller companies with a smaller volume of purchases was a valid business strategy, meaning that the indie companies or small developers could actually make money. However, this of course means also that the markets are flooded with games, new games, novel games, games which just completely rip off existing success stories. For example, Clash of Clans has been remade something like 5,000 different times, most of them Chinese knockoffs. But anyway, you might also need a marketer here, but which takes 1/3 cut from every sale, but it still actually generates you 3 times more money than the traditional box in a store way. But anyway, the digital distribution may give me more money from each sale I made, but of course there's also the pay-to-play and free-to-play models to consider here. I have a couple of more slides about these things here. First, let's take a look at the pay-to-play model. First of all, if I don't use any marketing budget, my only marketing is that I constantly harass every people I know via Facebook or other social media networks and release my game at App Store, I make something like 74 euros. Not exactly a good salary for my work, which usually takes something like 3 to 6 months. If I make a marketing deal, join a sort of a marketing chain or get a publisher which has turned out a marketing company, I might make something like 25,000 euros or more of that. Simply because I have added visibility. I have people playing other games, being given advertisements that, okay, you like this, how about would you like to play this one? Also, if you happen to be on your own category's top 25, it generates you 5,000 euros per day. That's actually something from an actual company who got into top 25 list, and they said that it's a 5,000 euros per day additional sales simply by being there. There's actually a couple of other companies which have said similar things, so that I think that number is quite correct. Anyway, making a game takes 3 to 6 months. That means that you create a game which is something that can survive or be of quality that actually you can publish in a mobile store, app store, or well, Google Play or anywhere. Meaning that of course you can throw together a complete rip-off or something like that in less than a month. But if you create a new product, create the characters, create the models, so on and so on, do quality assurance, at least try to catch your target customer segment, it's something like 3 to 6 months. However, 90% of all sales come within the 1 month from release. So 5 weeks after your initial launch, you have more or less sold most of the games you are ever going to sell. And of course, in the design, you have to understand that it's an international business by default, so you also have to design things so that they aren't really tightly tied into a certain culture or traditions or stuff like that, or at least you have to be able to release game in local languages. The addition of releasing game which is localized to some language is it's a bit dependent on the country we are talking about, but it can be something like plus 25% up to plus 100% sales, simply because the game itself speaks local language. For example, in Finland, the added sales are something like plus 25%. People are still paying or like to play games which are Finnish, even though everyone here speaks English, at least to some degree. Anyway, the pot here we are talking about isn't that huge. Well, if you make a profit of 25,000, it's something. If you are able to make enough money to stay afloat, it's a good thing. But there's actually worldwide something like $65 billion in this business, and Finland gets only 1/4 of a billion at this point. Well, these numbers are no longer exactly they have actually been rising for a couple of years, but basically I think the ratio hasn't really moved that much. In 2012, they has said that the games industry in Finland, for example, had 1,800 employees in about 200 companies. This also gives you an idea that most game companies employ something like 10 employees, some of them less. There's a couple of larger game studios which make the difference. So usually they are startups or small companies anyway. Okay, so this is pay to play. The more interesting thing is free to play model. This is something that actually is the hot potato of, mobile games currently. So basically, the free-to-play model, of course you all know this, but it's the idea that you get the core game completely free. You are able to play it as long as you want it. You have at least most of the features available to you, but anyway, you don't have to pay for anything unless you want to. Basically, this changes the game a bit. For example, the marketing is not just getting visibility, it's basically purchasing new users. So basically, the marketing decisions are only that we spend X euros, so we get Y new users. This is why all these advertisement companies or marketing companies and publishing companies exist. They reduce this ratio, the X euros spent to get Y new users. That's because, you get people who see your game in App Store and decide that, okay, I don't want to play this, they are of no use to you. There's actually people who even might download your game and never launch it. They are no use to you. So basically, you want to have people who download your game and start the game at least once. Those are the players you are actually paying for. Out of those people, if your game is really good, if it has high retention rate, even up to 14% of users might actually play your game more than once. The rest of those people, 86%, just play your game once, okay, this is boring, and then uninstall it or completely forget the game and never play it again. Out of those 14% of users who downloaded and started your game at least once and actually tried it more than once, 95% of players never purchase anything. They just use the free features. 4% meaning something like every 25th player might buy something once or twice, or pay for something extra, meaning that they once might buy extra diamonds, or they once might activate the paid content or buy one additional set of quests, or open one digital library content addition for themselves. Okay, so those players pay something, but they really aren't giving you the money. The 1% of players, 1% of those 40% who actually started the game at least once, they are the so-called whales. They bring you constant stream of income, even thousands of dollars per month. One person who held Clash of Clans worldwide #1 spot actually hired 3 people to keep the game open when he was sleeping or eating or showering or stuff like that, because the game had a shutdown counter of something like 3 minutes. So if you are away for more than 3 minutes, you are vulnerable to attack. So that person actually hired people to keep the game alive. And also there's people spending thousands and thousands of dollars on online games. They really get into it. Of course, those are just random single users, but still these whales are more or less the people who pay for the development and upkeep of the game. So anyway, you really have small amount of users. Every 1,000 user, more or less, might be a huge whale. 1% of your returning players are someone who actually pay you a significant amount of money, and every 20th user is someone who pays for something. But in any case, you make money only by gathering users. That's how free-to-play unfortunately works. So, even if those freeloaders are a huge minority, 95% of players never bring you anything. They enjoy your product, but they will never give you money for it. They are needed, and they need to be catered, meaning that you can't create a free-to-play game which is complete bastard against people never paying for anything. Because you need user base. You need to have people promoting the game, or if it's a multiplayer game, need to have users so that you have people playing against each other. And these ratios are more or less the same in every free-to-play model and with every monetization scheme, meaning that the only way to get more money is to get more users, paying or not. So that's what you are using the marketing, and that's what you have to do when you are trying to survive with the free-to-play game. Okay, well, but there's one assuring aspect here. This is just some diagram from the sales report on the video games in North America. This more or less shows that even that smallest sliver here, which is direct arcade games, 0.2% of sales, is out from the 65 billion US dollars, meaning that that small sliver is still hundreds of millions of dollars per year. It means also that basically you can't have one product that dominates everything. You have, of course, competition, but even if you are doing action games or sports or shooter games or family entertainment, casual or flight simulators, you always have enough money in the market to actually stay relevant if you are able to reach your customers. So even if you are competing for having people to play your game, like with free-to-play approach, or you are trying to get people to buy your game with pay-to-play model, if you have a good idea and good product and sound marketing plan, you more or less should be able to make at least some money out of it. There's no genre which is dead on arrival, so to say. Okay, so moving forward. The innovation part. Of course, it's hard to argue that the games are innovative. There's dominant systems to the degree of standardization. The iPhone and Android ecosystem are more or less dominating the mobile phone markets, and the game console systems by Sony and Microsoft are dominating the video game market. So, how can we do something innovative when we have so strict set of hardware? On the other hand, if you go to see what the companies are doing, seeing the most sold games, for example in Steam or somewhere else, it's sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel. There's actually the Modern Warfare games are, I don't know how many sequels there are now, something like 12 I guess, and also the sports games are actually something that hasn't really changed in the last 12 years. The last great step forward, for example for FIFA games, was when they went from 2D sprites to 3D models in FIFA 2003. So try to be innovative and say that you are in a creative field when you are just redoing the FIFA games again and again and again. However, like I said earlier, one product cannot fulfill all the customer needs. And the themes and trends, they keep changing. Today, or well, last week, we sold zombie games. This week, I don't know, realistic simulator shooting games. Mad Max with the new movie seems to be making these Fallout type alternative reality survival games a trendy, and next week, I don't know, dinosaurs, whatever, cowboys. Anyway, there's the one thing in games industry is that there's rarely companies which are staying on top for eternity. Of course, well, Electronic Arts is more of a publishing company now. Same with Ubisoft, which no longer is actually founded. They both are no longer founded around a couple of IPRs or game franchises. They are more or less publishing houses. So they are basically more than just game developers now. Anyway, you have to have innovation and creativity to find those new market niches where you can sell your product and make money. For example, Minecraft. Basically a programming project where there was this sort of an idea that we make digital Lego game and be able to create anything you want with with a really simple set of basic tools, which is now a huge franchise of stuff and make several $1 billion for the guy who first created the game, because he had enough innovation to see that that is actually something that could sell. So, well, it functions on these ecosystems and things, but it's still an innovation. And of course, if you want to be adventurous, you can always join a new startup and go from one company to another, because the game companies also tend to rise and fall and fold up and cease to exist and change their ownership sometimes quite rapidly. Anyway, there's a couple of ideas on the design. Like I said earlier, the games are designed to deliver user experience. The playability, having fun while playing, is important. Well, at least having the preferred experience. And technical viewpoint, good enough is enough. You don't have to optimize your search routing algorithm or stuff like that, as long as it functions well enough. And overall, the idea on game development, as defined by the people in the game business, is that game development is creative work with software engineering stuff in it, not the other way around. Okay, but there still are some realistic things that you have to take into account. First of all, games are not art for art's sake. No one makes games so that they can just say that this game installation is expressing my feelings towards something or something like that. Games are designed so that they make profit. There are games which are artistic, like the Journey for PlayStation 3 was really artistic game, which actually has had quite minimal amount of gameplay mechanics. However, well, the artistic merits and creativity are almost always secondary, although well-received attribute. People are in game business to make money, but they also consider themselves more creative people than being in normal software industry. However, if they are asked to select if they want to be the person who makes profit or the person who has merit for being a hugely successful game designer or developer for a game which was really liked and it was sort of a really praised by the critics, but wasn't that much of a commercial success, or person making huge obscene amount of money out of game which has nothing surprising in it, almost everyone says that they would be completely cool by making obscene amount of money making some random stuff which copies most of the game mechanics from other existing products. Meaning that games are not, well, they might be art, some games definitely are art, but the games are not art for art's sake. So, there's always marketing, there's always testing, what is fun, is this game fun, is there enough people who would pay money to actually make this development work worthwhile. Finally, we come into the normal startup teams. So, how people get into the game business then? Well, on some places, like Montreal, which is the North America's game development capital, people get into game business by going to Ubisoft's or Electronic Arts office and saying that I want a job. Unfortunately, it's not something that works here, or well, in most of places in Europe. So how people in Finland end up being in games is that they make a startup company which makes mobile games for smartphones and tablets. It's 2 to 4 people, and they are owners of the company. They usually work without salary because the funding is tight enough that they are able to do something, provided that they are not literally eating away the money. So you might want to have someone else paying your rent and food and other stuff, and actually being funded by the significant another is actually quite normal approach to the funding work here. So anyway, 2 to 4 people, usually designer, lead programmer, and artist. One person who understands how business happens, one person who understands how technology happens, and one person who is able to draw something that actually looks nice enough to show to other people. That's really it. First idea is to get something simple published, because unless you have published something, unless your company has a portfolio, you are just heir to the big players. No one gives a damn about a game developer team which hasn't published anything. You have to have a proof that you can deliver projects. Biggest expenses are tools and marketing work. The licenses to use all the tools in commercial purposes. Of course, with Unity, this is free. But if you are doing something with Unity, you usually tend to buy the Pro license to get more detailed tools for managing different platforms. You can take away the splash screen from the Unity startup sequence and also do some other smaller things. Also, buying additional graphics and stuff like that is quite normal. And the startup team spends most of their money on marketing, either getting people to see and test out your software, or artificially enlarging the pool of players so that the whales and other paying customers start to show up. Basically, here's the list of the 3 most important problems and things needed by startups. It's money, the second is money, and the third one is also money. That's because if you have it, there's really no problems. You can buy most of the stuff you can do by yourself, and everything else is just spending hours learning, doing, refining, testing, talking with customers, developing and doing. So to say, using elbow grease to make your product shine. Okay, so a couple of slides and then I'm done. So this is actually one interesting study we conducted. These are companies, these cases are companies, actual real companies making real games, and these are different things the companies are using. Human capital, people, knowledge, experience, marketing, work, financing, background financing, key partnerships with other companies, customer relationships, key resources, meaning the licenses and all the hardware stuff, activities, how management happens, innovation, how good their design work is, and customer segment, how good they are at selecting their customers. So, the black blocks here imply that these are the 3 most important things for this company. The white box denotes that this is the least important thing, and the non-colored means that they are just random noise. Basically saying that they might or might not appreciate that. So, what we can take away from this is that the human capital is something that always trumps the companies. If you need to have experienced people, you need to have talent and skills. There's just no way around it. In most cases, you need to have good marketing work. This company, which didn't see marketing as important, was actually having a key partner which did all the marketing for them. Interestingly, so did the case B, so these immediately reflect to this result. One company here said that being close to customers and hearing what they would like to have is an important aspect for them, and only one company said that they have a key resource which is vital for their functioning. This was a license deal with one game console platform. if they would lose that, they would lose their one of their most important marketing areas, so that's why it's understandable. But anyway, financing, marketing, human capital. These are important. Who your customers are, in most cases, what your resources are, how you do it, how you design it, even almost how much you listen to your customers are things that happen but aren't that important. Finally, here's a short description of how game companies tend to happen. So if you take the entire game development project with a group of friends or with a group of people who you want to work with, you more or less end up with this phase 1 group. It's a demo group. You can create an actual commercial game, but there's no significant amount of money involved, and the problem is that you need appropriate talent to get the graphical artists and the music and sound effects and people who are competent enough to do programming work or graphics work, most likely. There's no graphic artists in Lappeenranta at this point. Everyone is employed in some company. So if you know someone who is really good at drawing stuff, you might want to recruit them now when they still are unknown to the business itself. There's actually a couple of examples in Lappeenranta where this course actually created this demo group, which then started to grow up. Basically, there's 4 phases here. The demo group is more or less just a pre-startup group. Then there's actual business startup when you are doing your first actual game. Then the recent startup where you have game, you are able to fund new projects with money coming from existing stuff. And the final one, when you are full business, when you have enough resources to do self-publishing or doing these sort of B products, which are some things that you want to get out or want to put out to market but are unable to find yourself partnership. Basically, these here denote things that are usually bought or acquired at that point. The business startup has the first priority of having game designer and lead artist. The recent startup needs someone who knows actual business and management skills, and they also need more talent pool to be able to make larger projects. And finally, when you are in full business, you might want to have your own marketing people, your own musician here, or people making music and sound effects and stuff, because those things aren't that expensive. They can usually be bought, but if you have high quality AAA commercial product, you want to have your own sound effects guy or girl to be able to edit things into seamless experience. Also domain experts, like people who actually know more than some user experience on for example, how Nintendo systems work or how networking happens, or in domain of, for example, making shooting games, how some small team tactics are actually functioning, so that you can get the group commanding and the animations and activities fluid. There's also other things. On this other side, there's partner skills, so what sort of things are usually bought from outside. Okay, I've been talking now for an hour and 14 minutes. That's actually 25 minutes more than I promised to. Sorry about that. But anyway, this is more or less everything I have to show today. If you don't have anything to demonstrate to me, then by all means, you are free to leave. If you want to show your tutorial work or ask questions or stuff like that, please stay here. We can talk, and if you want to have questions or stuff like that, I'll just end the recording and then we can talk more freely. Okay? Good.